Have you ever felt frustrated trying to find the right tools and platforms to grow your online community? Do you wish that there was an all-in-one solution that made community building simple? I know I have. How can we leverage online communities and tools that will foster deeper connections and engagement with our audience? Today, I'm speaking with Andrew Guttormson, the co-founder and chief revenue officer of Circle, which is a leading community platform used by over 10,000 businesses worldwide, including me. And with his experience scaling two successful startups, Andrew has some really valuable insights to share on building online communities, implementing customer feedback, and leading teams through rapid growth. Welcome back to the Online Business Launchpad podcast. I'm your host, Trudy Rankin, bringing you stories and advice from successful online entrepreneurs, because if they can do it, so can you. I've been running my own online business for over 8 years now, helping hundreds of entrepreneurs start and grow the online side of their business. And my mission is to help you solve your business challenges so you can have more money, more time, and more flexibility in how you live and work. If you're ready to build your online community and make meaningful connections with your audience, don't go anywhere. Let's dive in to learn from Andrew's experience in scaling an online community platform to well over 10,000 passionate users worldwide. Welcome to the Online Business Launchpad podcast. I'm your host, Trudy Rankin. It was early-ish 2020, and I was ripping my hair out, not because of COVID, but because the software I was trying to use to manage my online business liftoff community was clunky, was hard to set up, and it was just plain annoying to use. So when Pat Flynn mentioned that he was taking a look at Circle for his community management tool, I decided to investigate. And I did a bit of playing around. I liked what I saw, and I signed up. And as part of the regular communications from this relatively new company, I'd get these emails from a smiling guy named Andy Guttormson. Now, Andy was on the founding team at Teachable, which is a platform for courses and learning. And he went on to co-found Circle in 2020. And Circle has grown like topsy. Circle's now the world's leading community platform for creators and businesses, with customers like Adobe, Webflow, Brendon Burchard, Pat Flynn, et cetera, and just tons and tons of others. It's a very popular platform and it works really well. But today we've got Andy here on the show with us, and he's going to be answering questions and talking about his journey on Circle or founding Circle and just some of the things he's learned around community management. Andy, thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for having me. I've been really looking forward to this.
I'm really looking forward to it too. I always, because of my background, Chief Information Officer, I've always had an interest in software as a service companies, businesses, and because of my background with starting my own business, I'm interested in startups. And so you've been involved in at least 2 startups that I know of. And it's just fascinating to me to talk to somebody who's been through that process. So I'd like to just, if you would please, just start by talking to people, our listeners, and just tell them a little bit about your background and kind of what makes you tick, that makes you want to start businesses.
So right now, one of the co-founders and the chief revenue officer at a company called Circle. We're a leading community platform with 10,000 customers, software product. And before that, I was one of the early team members, probably the 6th or 7th team member at a company called Teachable. And Teachable was a software company serving course platforms. We were there for 5 years, my co-founders and I, and ultimately Teachable was acquired. It was a really good outcome, sold for $250 million. We then were trying to figure out what's next, because we're excited to work on something new and try something else. And so we started Circle at the time. And this is right around when you were pulling your hair out. I'm glad it grew back. But we started Circle right then. And now it's almost 4 years later. And on that, I would say like that startup journey again, although the business is much more mature, you're gearing in on probably about $18-19 million in revenue, just doubled last year. Those last 8 or 10 years, 2 successful companies so far, right? But also what's not mentioned is the failed attempts before that, which were required in order to get the 2 kind of initial wins here.
So I'm curious, failed attempts, 2 successful attempts. at starting at successful companies, but there's something that keeps people going when they've been through these failures and work through those failures and get to the success eventually. If you were able to describe in just a very few words what it is about you and your co-founders that helped you keep going after the failures, what would it be?
So I think I think Teachable is a good example. When I joined Teachable, I was 26 years old and I had just gone back and I was living with my parents, and living with your parents at 26 years old, it's pretty humbling, right? And I went to Encore. Encore is the founder of Teachable, and now he's one of my best friends in the world. And 26, I applied for an unpaid internship at Teachable. There's only like 7 people working there, 5 people working there at the time. And I said, look, I basically made a big list of all the ideas for here's how you can grow the business and stuff like that. And I went in, I interviewed, and it's really humbling and not at my best at the time. Confidence is lower. I really put myself out there and I was resilient, but probably because I just knew what the alternative was. And I had the itch in me. I knew what was possible out there and I knew it would take a few goes. And so sometimes it's just, if you mentally prepare that it's going to take many times to figure something out and you're willing to look stupid and be humbled along the way, I think it's easier to get through it.
Because we hear all this hype in the internet and in the news about how somebody's been an instant overnight success. And that invariably, if you dig into the story, somebody's actually been doing this for 10 or 20 years, honing their skills. And so basically you went with Teachable, you gave them a whole bunch of ideas about how they could grow. Did they listen? Did they pay attention to this 26-year-old unpaid intern? What sort of happened to take them to the point where they're listening and implementing what you were talking about?
Yes, all the credit in the world to Encore, who came in and took the ideas really seriously. You're pretty hands off and really gave me a shot. So I came in, I had that list of ideas and I worked through it. And my goal was, look, first 30 days, I need to have a few quick wins here and show what's possible. And so came in, started executing. We started, for instance, to run weekly webinars. We started to do a bunch of extra sales calls and things like that. So there was a lot of quick wins and execution that happened. And Encore doesn't care who the ideas are coming from. What he cares is, are they good ideas and are they driving value for the business? And so I really did believe that if I went in and executed there, that it would pay off. And so a lot of it is having the right person who's willing to bet on their team, give their team autonomy. And they were willing to do that. And by the way, the whole team was almost like, we were all too young for the amount of responsibility that we had at the time. It's what Encore and I always joke about now, because the business grew really quickly. It was doing $10 million a year, $15 million a year shortly after that.
I guess there's no better way of growing up quick, is there, though, and getting loaded with responsibility that we're maybe not ready for. At whatever, we might be 60 and suddenly go, I'm not ready for this. I don't know how to do this.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So just take us very quickly. So you were able to help grow the company. This was Teachable at the time. You got to the place where there was a really successful exit. Just talk a little bit about that process that you went through in terms of going, okay, we've just successfully exited from this company. We put a lot of hard work into it. And now what?
So I think for the team, especially people who had been there for a lot of years, it's nice to get a win. Right. So it was a win for a lot of people. And it wasn't a huge financial win for really anybody except for a couple of the founders, but it was and at the time, we had been there for about 5 years. So Sid had already left about a year earlier. Then I was getting ready to figure out what my next thing to do is. And so I went to Encore and told them, think about starting a company in the community space, right? And at the time, the course platforms only did courses. Right. And by the way, I was sick of courses because I had done courses for the last 5 years. I was ready to do something completely new. But the pandemic had happened And there was this big shift where people were creating these communities around common interests and different missions and things like that. And the issue is that there weren't great tools for it. There was Facebook groups. And at the time, there was also this kind of observation, which is if I looked at a lot of the best course creators, they were using kind of community elements like Facebook groups, and at times they'd have like Slack groups and things like that alongside their courses. And so we thought, what if we found almost like create this little product, this little like embeddable thing that you could take and put inside of any course platform, ideally teachable because we're biased to teachable. And so that's how Circle started. Was what if we created almost like what was a private Facebook group, but also made parts of it that you could put into any course platform. Eventually, what happened is that we realized the destination was more so the community platform than the course itself. And so a lot of people were just running communities using Circle without saying, hey, can I integrate some course into it? And so eventually we just really built out that community product. And of course, you can run a course inside of Circle as like one of the things you do. But that's how the company started.
That's interesting to me because at the time when I first heard about Circle, as I said, I was really frustrated with what I was using because I like Slack, right? I use Slack a lot for lots and lots of things, but I was having to use a combination of Slack and a WordPress plugin, and it was just driving me crazy. So finding out about something that was going to integrate all of those aspects was really intriguing to me. I was really interested in that. And so obviously signed up, got started. And then, of course, it's a startup. It's a beta sort of a thing. It's gotten far enough along so it can be made public, but there's still lots of issues and things to be worked out of it. And I'm just curious, in terms of the approach that you used to be able to go from this idea about how it was going to be something that you're going to plug into somebody else's platform to what it is today, what kind of a process did you use that effectively allowed you to pivot like on almost a weekly basis until you got to something that's really successful?
So one of the things that we have opted for is probably the path of most resistance, which is we don't just go away and build the product. We're very customer centric. And so we talk to a lot of customers, right? And that's not always the easy thing to do because the customers, when they care, will tell you what they want or what they're not getting. But it's been a huge advantage for us is that we're willing to have all the conversations. For instance, the first 1,000 customers that we brought on at Circle, I did demos with our first 1,000 customers, and we didn't have a sales team. And so there's a lot of that kind of big that feedback loop there. So what it does for us is like we're always getting these qualitative inputs from the rest of the customer base. And we do every single quarter, we do a survey that goes out to all of our customers where they tell us what they like, what they don't like, what they're not using, all that kind of stuff. And we really analyze it. We build our entire then roadmap around it. So it's actually pretty obvious what to build when you talk to your customers as much as we do. The hard part, like the part that's really challenging and by the way, I think for a lot of other companies, like it's pretty obvious what to build. The hard part is always in the sequencing and the resourcing, knowing, hey, if we build this feature first, it's going to actually make these other three easier to build. Or if we build this feature first, it's going to make this segment of customers happy, but actually they're a really small segment, even though they're the loudest, and we should build for this other segment. And so it's a lot of the sequencing that's tough.
And that's the tricky part, balancing it out, because you also have to throw in the aspect of if we build this particular chunk out, that's a lot of work. We're going to have to hire new people. Do we have enough revenue coming into all of those sorts of things? So in terms of the teamness of that process, how did you go about prioritizing all that to make the decisions about what to prioritize?
So it's led by Sid and Rudy. Those are my two co-founders. They really built the V1 of the product. Now they oversee the entire like product and design orgs. And that's purely like they're really running that side of the business. So I don't run that side of the business, but we basically have qualitative inputs that are always coming in. And then we have more quantitative like product usage data and things like that. And we have quarterly product roadmap where we have team leads who can provide input, but we're a pretty top-down organization in that perspective, in that ultimately it does come to a lot of Sid and Rudy's judgment, and we take the inputs, but ultimately it comes down to them versus like a whole bunch of people on our team making all the decisions. Because this way it's more centralized and holistic when we do it that way versus feel like we're taking a bunch of things and bringing them together.
Yeah, so it like anything, there's lots and lots of moving parts that you have to bring together. Somebody has to make the final decision and to decide what to work on. I want to come back to something that is implicit in what you said, but I want to bring it out into the light because in my experience, talking to lots of founders, especially of SaaS companies, the ones who are the most successful are the ones who do it the way you've done it, which is to listen to don't build it first. Go talk to your customers first. Find out what they need, and then keep going back and talking to them and asking them. However, whether you've done it that way or not, and when I say you, generally people who are interested in this space, a lot of times the feedback that can come back can really sound very critical and feel like criticism instead of positive feedback. How do you mentally deal with that whole side of things where you've worked really hard on something and you've thought you'd listen to people and you come back and they go, nah, missed the mark? How do you deal with that yourself?
So sometimes it feels like criticism because it is criticism, and that's okay. As like an anchor, where my head always goes is if somebody's giving you feedback, first of all, that probably wasn't easy for them. They probably don't like being, for instance, in our Circle customer community, we have 15,000 people in there. They probably don't like coming in and giving the negative feedback to me or Sid or Rudy or our team. Like that's hard for them. But so first of all, like good on them for being willing to give the feedback. And obviously like how you deliver, it's nice, but we're all adults here. We have hard conversations every day in our own business all the time. Everybody's super used to it and has thick skin. But ultimately though, at least with Circle, our customers, a lot of them have their entire business on Circle. So when they have feedback and when it comes across as critical, it's because it really matters to them and they need it to work well. And that's on us to deliver that for them. So it's always coming from that place, which makes it really easy to be patient with any critical feedback, but also easy to like take it super seriously. Now, there are times when we make a decision about what to build and people don't like that we made that decision. And they say, hey, you built this, but I've been waiting for this and this obvious thing forever. That happens all the time. And typically we've been incredibly intentional about it. They may not like the reasoning or the decision, and then they may not agree with the reasoning or rationale, but there's almost always really good rationale behind it. And that I sleep a little bit better at night with those decisions because I know we probably did something for the greater good somewhere else or made an investment somewhere else. But I don't personally get offended by any critical. If I think somebody has bad intentions, and which that's happened very rarely, I can think of maybe 2 or 3 examples of that. Otherwise, no, we reflect on it and we learn.
I think it's really useful to hear that because I know that for a lot of entrepreneurs, you're investing your personal self into what you're working on, and to be able to take feedback and hear what people are saying without taking it personally can be really tricky. And if you have a team, and maybe you might not even have a team, but just you mentioned having hard conversations can be really difficult for some people. What makes it easier for you to have hard conversations?
So this is a thing that I think I was pretty bad at for the first 4 or 5 years of my career. I think I was pretty bad at it. I think I'm getting way better at it now, and I've worked on it a lot. So a few things that make it easier. The first thing is like right when somebody joins the team, and even before that in the interview process, like we tell them what our culture is like, which is like we're very direct. It's a team sport. If you imagine you're watching a basketball game, the coach on the sideline isn't being sweet to everybody all the time. Like we're trying to win, and that involves some intensity sometimes. But the first thing is just being really setting the expectation that there's going to be a lot of hard conversations. Next thing is like just the volume of hard conversations. So giving the feedback often rather than waiting for it to build up to some kind of big thing where once at the performance review, you give somebody the really tough feedback 6 months later or whatever. No, like we're just giving the feedback all day, every day. Sid yesterday, he joked to me, he's like, yeah, I have found that I have to carve out at least about 2 hours a day just to give people feedback in real time on this document here, this thing here, whatever it is there. And all of a sudden, when I'm getting this feedback in a constant stream all day, every day, some of it seeming tough, I realize it's actually much lower stakes than I thought. It's the norm to get the feedback. And then when I do mess up or I get the tough feedback and the world doesn't end, then I realize, okay, good. That's a data point for me. I can get tough feedback and doesn't mean the world's ending. Okay, next time I get tough feedback, I'll be more receptive to it. But you can build it like into the culture. I'll tell you what, the opposite, like the worst version of that is I read a really great, it was a really great blog post, and it was from a woman who worked at Stripe. And she said the best thing about Stripe was that they didn't have an LGTM culture, a looks good to me culture. Like you work with some people and you put a lot of work into it. Say, all right, what do you guys think? Like you review it, whatever. And try, yep, LGTM looks good to me. Or you can go in and actually spend the time and really review it, give somebody great feedback, really make it better. So when you have other people's eyes on it, you really trust them and all of that. Like that's way better. And that's way better for me as the person getting the feedback.
I really like that. That's so true, because you want somebody, it wins. It means you've invested some of yourself into helping somebody else succeed. When you take the time to give them good feedback, structure it in a way that it's not ripping them down and shredding their egos, but it's done in such a way that it's meant to lift up and actually help with stuff in terms of improving the product or service that you're offering. And I want to so that's about teams. And I think what you've said can apply to the community that people are managing as well. In the work that you do, got a couple of questions about that. First of all, you're the CR, or the Chief Revenue Officer. Can you just explain to people a little bit what that means in terms of what you do on a day-to-day?
Sure. So I think it can mean different things at different companies. For me, I oversee our sales, marketing functions, our revenue operations and data functions, our customer success functions. So really the go-to-market org, which is essentially, it's really the part of the team that gets more people to know about Circle, try Circle, buy Circle, and hopefully stick with Circle, really.
Okay, and that's up here, high level stuff. Give us maybe just a few points about what a day in the life might look like for you.
Sure. So maybe this week is a good example. So a lot of my job on a day-to-day is understanding we have these revenue targets and we're growing the business, and how do all the pieces come together? So on Monday, we have our weekly revenue meeting where I have essentially the VPs of each function. We come in, we look at how is the business performing? How do our leading indicators look? So all of the leads coming in, how are they converting in the funnel? How is our sales team doing? How much of that is going to our sales team versus like self-serve, people just buying the product without needing to talk to sales? How are people like expanding, accounts expanding, upgrades? We have these higher tier plans. There should be a very predictable amount of those accounts that are upgrading every single day. And is that on track? At the same time, so there's this always on business that is just a machine. It's humming along. And then at the same time, it's the business as usual piece. But then there's also telling the story of our product. And our product velocity has been a big advantage for us. It's something that we always talk about, which is like, what are the big new features coming out? We have tiering. So we have tier 0 features, which is like the biggest things we do. So in a few weeks, we'll announce that we're going into Brazil as a space, like a tier 0 thing for us. We have a couple other exciting ones I can't talk about yet for later in the year. Tier 1 might be something that's a really big feature. When we launched a courses feature, our workflows, which was a big feature that we launched in automations. And then we have smaller ones, tier 2 and tier 3. And so it's aligning our product to the story we tell our customers and making sure, okay, are all those launches on track, checking in with all the teams. And then it's a lot of each week I have one-on-ones with all my direct reports. And so those, we really try not to skip those, are at least a few hours. And then right now we're in the middle of this big brand campaign that we're doing, our first ever big high budget commercial. And so we've been doing a lot of interviews to tell that story, which is how we got connected. And actually this week, I'm in a hotel room right now. I just flew in because I'm meeting with Sid and Rudy, and we're going to then map out the rest of the year for kind of our circle, we call it like Circle 3.0, the evolution of the product. And so it's a lot of context switching on a day-to-day basis, which is great.
Variety is the spice of life, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So bringing it, and I really enjoy hearing about the kinds of days that people have, because you get a sense of kind of what you're having to deal with, or what's enjoyable, what's, oh my, that's interesting in terms of a day-to-day thing. Because and just for you, just a lot of the people who do listen to this podcast are people who are still in corporate and they're looking to start their own business, and they're going, what am I going to be up against? And it's good to be able to hear that. I want to come back again to just the community, because you mentioned that Circle's got, I think you said 15,000 people in its community. That's a lot of people. And by definition, there's a community, and you will have shaped the community vibe that's there. And I pop into the Circle community every now and again and just see what's there and have a look around and communicate back and forth. How did you, it might not have been you specifically, but you would have had a hand in it. How did you and the team shape that vibe? How did you develop the community in a way that sort of fit what you needed, wanted, and what was going to be also useful for the community? It's a two-way street. Do you understand what I'm saying? How did you get it to the way it is at the moment and how it operates?
So we've tried to be intentional about it. Of course, like communities develop their own cultures and you have some control over that. Mathilde has been the one who really stood up our community when she joined, which is about 3 years ago now. And there's a few very tactical things we do. So the first thing is we don't have as much control with our community as other communities do when it comes to who we let in. Because if you're a paying customer, you get access, right? It's not like a membership community where people come in, they apply, we vet them. We don't say no to anybody. If you are a customer, you get access. And so then everybody's going to get in. And so at that point, then it's like, how do we set proper expectations with onboarding? And we have different things we do, like orientation sessions. We let members get to know each other. We have weekly office hours. I think one of the things that really helps set the culture is, and by the way, also really helps people like have better intentions just generally, is being present and talking with them and having the not just anonymous folks, no real name, commenting and all of that. Like everybody knows us for better or for worse. Like they know our faces, they see us around, we show up to events, we have conversations. And when you do that, it adds much more of a human element, which is what, the Circle community is all about. Is like everybody there is people. We're all building people first businesses. I think that really helps shape the culture. We do try and have the community members themselves contribute a lot and kind of like build that in so that they're the ones teaching. It's not just us sharing our ideas all the time. It's them sharing their ideas. If somebody has a great question, ideally there's 5 other people that have a great answer, and it's not just our answers. And so we try and train people in the community to contribute. When somebody goes against a certain value that we have, let's say like, they're giving critical feedback, but it's like critical feedback and it's not really coming from a good place. We won't shame them in front of everybody. Like Mathilde will just send a nice note, or Pedro from our team. They run our community. Like they'll just send a nice note in the DMs. And by the way, I can't tell you how many times somebody has been frustrated. We've sent them a DM. They've immediately apologized. And then we go and then we help solve their problem. And then they turn into a fan for life. They become great members in the community. We have improved our product or something because of the feedback that they gave us. And so I think you can really shape the culture, but it requires you to be pretty ruthless day in, day out about being present, showing up.
And that can be really intense and quite hard to do sometimes. How do you, like, you've got 2 people that are helping to manage the community. That's only 2 people for 15,000 community members. Not everybody's going to be on there at the same time, but how do you manage that intensity in terms of the humanness for your team members, Mathilde and Pedro? How do they get time to go on holiday?
So there's not just Mathilde and Pedro. There are other people on the Circle team. Like we try to be very involved in the community, right? So with some good planning, they'll go on their normal vacations and all of that kind of thing. But yeah, actually the thing that's great about a community is that you start to have members who are almost they're like the special members, they're ambassadors. They know what the values of the community are, and they help reinforce those values and build people up in the community. And that's one of the big benefits is like you can lean on others, not just the Circle team, but like there's a whole bunch of people in the Circle community that somebody will ask for help on something, or hey, where should I find this, or whatever it is. Like there'll be a bunch of other people typically that aren't even Circle team that go and help solve it for them. So that's nice. It takes a little bit of time to get there.
Yeah, it's also part of the culture that you've built over time, because it can take time to get there in terms of people realizing A, that it's okay to do that, and B, there's a certain way of doing it that's better than another. So I think that's really important. Just one quick question before we start to wrap up. And that is for you personally, as you've been through your journey, both with Teachable and with Circle. And obviously Teachable was a little bit different because you came in as an employee, and you're there as part of the founding team, but you're an employee. But with Circle, you're one of the founders. And so there's a little bit more responsibility there in terms of helping it to succeed or not succeed. What would be it could be one or two key things that you personally have learned in your journey from Teachable to Circle that you didn't know as an employee, that you now know as a founder, that's helped, that you've had to learn or in order to grow into that role, if that makes any sense?
Yeah, so I think it's probably the biggest, it's what we touched on before around being willing to have harder conversations with the team and really focus on helping the team grow. So the biggest learning for me is when I used to put off the hard conversation, it would result in like 8 other harder conversations over the next 3 to 6 months. And so now every time I don't want to do that, I don't want to have that hard conversation. I'm just like, I don't want to have this hard conversation, but I also don't want to have those 8 other hard conversations. And also it's my job. My job is literally there's nobody else to do it. When you're the founder, like you got to do it. So I feel a big responsibility to do that. I've also seen what happens when you don't have the hard conversations, and actually like the pain it can put other people through, the lack of organization. Oh, sorry about that. I don't know if you can hear this.
No, you're good.
But I've seen like the pain and the problems it can cause when you're not willing to do that. And so that's the biggest thing is I was always thinking about like, all right, don't put it off. Give the feedback now, have the conversation tomorrow, not next week. And my co-founders have really helped me do that. And I think if I were, doing this on my own, first of all, I'd never be able to do it on my own, but always being able to go back to them and knowing like, all right, even if you have 6 folks you've had to have hard conversation with 6 folks this week, I still know Rudy and Sid will be like, oh, good job. And then those 6 folks will be happy soon enough and they'll get it and they'll take it.
I'd by far rather have somebody have a hard conversation with me rather than go, oh, it's okay. And then all of a sudden you get a big punch in the face. I'd rather have somebody just tell me straight up. So,
absolutely.
So that's interesting, but it does take time to develop the skills to have successful hard conversations successfully.
Right.
Yeah. So Andy, it's been really great having you on the podcast. If people were interested in either finding out more about Circle, or if they were interested in just reaching out to you and just chatting with you, where would they go?
Yeah, so come to circle.so anytime. If you're thinking about creating a community, just do it. You go create a free trial, play around, see what it's like. And that's what I would recommend. Of course, reach out anytime. My email is just andrew@circle.so.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Really appreciate you having me on. It's been a lot of fun to have the conversation.
I've enjoyed it. If you're a longtime listener to the Online Business Launchpad podcast, you'll know that I often talk about Pat Flynn's SPI Pro community. Now, what you might not know is that I'm a founding member of that community. And every year I keep signing up because I get so much value out of it. For example, every month I meet with a mastermind group whose members are at the same spot on the entrepreneurial journey as I am. And we celebrate our wins and navigate challenges together. And if we want to chat in between meetings, we just easily jump into the space that's reserved just for our mastermind and just say whatever's on our mind. It's a really supportive space where we all keep growing in confidence and capabilities, knowing that someone or several someones have got our back. And that's not all the value I get from being part of the SPI Pro community. I have access to really relevant trainings that Pat has put together,
Plus, I've connected with several amazing guests for my podcast, experts who shared invaluable insights with my audience, and the opportunities just keep coming. I've had the honor of being on Pat Flynn's own podcast and even teaching other SPI Pro members about some of the things that I'm expert in. And being a part of the SPI Pro community is like having my own special group of advisors that I can reach out to anytime I need them. Imagine having that network at your fingertips, where every connection inspires and every interaction teaches something new. That's what SPI Pro is all about for me. It's more than a community. It's a place where we as entrepreneurs come together to push the boundaries of what we can achieve. So are you ready to be part of something bigger? To learn, share, and grow alongside fellow business owners who are just as driven as you? Check it out for yourself and see for yourself the difference a truly collaborative community can make. And if you'd like to use my affiliate link to sign up, go to onlinebusinessliftoff.com/SPI-pro. If you do, I'll receive a small commission at no extra cost to you, for which I thank you. And once you're in the community, say hello, and I'll be delighted to show you around. So join me in the SPI Pro community, and let's reach new heights together. Once again, that's onlinebusinessliftoff.com/SPI-pro. And we'll see you there.